US President Donald Trump says US won't pull out of NATO after receiving commitments from allies. Trump asserted he has the authority to pull out of the treaty unilaterally, but that the additional commitments he had received at the two-day summit made that unnecessary. But this is just the part of the story. We today are discussing not just the summit, but really how Ukraine cooperates with its allies, in particularly regarding the military support, but not just. And for that, we have with us Brian Irwin, who is the Canadian Defence Attache in Ukraine, and also Sharon Irwin, who is a Deputy Director of NATO Liaison Office. So, as we know, with the war in Ukraine's occupied eastern territories waging on, the need for a strong and effective military force has never been more important. Since the start of the conflict in Donbass, in the Yavoriv training center in the Lviv region had been preparing country's servicemen for the front line, with help of abroad. Now, several military training missions are based in the center, including those from the US, Canada, Poland, UK, and the Baltic countries. And these trainings aims to improve combat skills needs for the war in Donbass, but it also ensuring the gradual introduction of NATO standards into the Ukrainian armed forces. So we have our reporter traveling to Yavoriv, and after we see how, in fact, the international military support and train Ukrainian soldiers, we'll have the discussion.
Чисто виходять двоє. Пішли. Ходимо.
Тепер відход! Дим пішов! Видихай, бобер, ти що на старичок змучився, бачиш?
Я ще фори дам.
Зараз ще дим розійдеться і ще разок вийдемо.
How old are you?
24.
What made you join the armed forces?
I don't know, my whole family had served. So my granddad, dad, and I decided to serve. I went to the volunteer service in Lviv, to the 80th Air Assault Brigade. There were different kinds of training, trips to the training ground, and then a trip to where the government's military operations take place in the east. My most memorable moments from then were in Slavyansk and from the Luhansk airport.
Move only if you hear a shot somewhere behind you. Shout contact, and it's advisable to say contact at 11, at 12, so that the friends you're working with, who are in the rooms, so that they can hear and understand that you've made contact and that you're not shooting. You understand?
This is a formal training at the Yarovsky training center. Maybe for a month or two after this they'll have a break, and then they'll go to the east maybe.
Like he's tied up, and then you take him away, push his head down,
I get
so
it.
that he can't see anything.
Better still, if you have a sack, put the sack over his head. I'm not joking.
No, I get it. Here's one. There are cartridges inside. Look, here's another one.
4 magazines, right?
I have 3 magazines. I have 3, so 1, 2, 3. Yes,
Without any approach, without anything at all, just go.
I get it.
Руки за гол. Став. На стінку руки. Тримаєш? Стоять. Чистий. Рук, голову. Виводимо. До стіни. На колені. Все. То, що ми проходимо тут, а в реальному бою там...
Everything that we do here would be a matter of life and death in a real battle. My partner's life, for example, if I don't cover my sector properly. My life will depend on it, and everything we are taught here gives us an understanding of what it's like. Even though they have fought in different wars, weapons are the same everywhere. Bullets are the same everywhere. Missiles, that's all.
Зброя майже схожа. Скрізь, пулі скрізь, тобто ракети, то все. Ну, то проблема в толкателі, правильно? Чи в щок?
А може і в тому, і в тому.
А може в тому, і в тому.
Іди сторони пристріляй, бо то наша. Так, то наша Дашка, пристріляй, нормально там.
Забороняю стріляти несправною зброєю і несправними боєприпасами. Готові? Вперед. Заряжай. Огонь. Ще раз.
Overall, the instructors here are professionals, and if they carried out a training like they did in the Soviet Union or somewhere else, just to have a soldier come in, shoot 12 rounds and leave, everyone here has served, so everyone knows how to do it. This right here is completely different. Of course, we have the anti-terrorist operation going on in this country, even if they call it something different now. That's why there's more preparation, more spent per soldier. There's more tension on the individual soldier.
Попадание. О, пристрелено нормалек.
If we're talking about the units we teach, those are first of all staff trainings. So preparing the staff based at the headquarters of the 2nd Battalion of the 80th Brigade. Polish instructors are also working in areas such as artillery, fire support, intelligence groups and riflemen, as well as sapper groups. We make ignition tubes. We explode small pellets so that we can see what we are dealing with, what kind of personnel we are dealing with. We also check the building for tripwires, mines and other kinds of surprises, which we know from experience were used in the anti-terrorist operation zone. Personnel have to make mistakes, and we have to tell them that so that they make those mistakes here and not in the anti-terrorist operation zone.
We are now heading to the headquarters, and as instructors, we will give lessons there. They carry out tactical staff training programs. We will mostly observe their work, but along the way, we will show them how to improve based on our own experiences. During these staff trainings, information is exchanged as to certain operations. New orders are received every minute, which after discussion are delegated to the servicemen.
Заданих точках. Готових до переходу в атаку на зачистку об'єкта Майрі. Прийом. Мінометку постав на свої міста. Розвідку спросіть, де вони знаходяться.
We observe the work in the Tactical Operational Center. We carry out combat missions. The subunits defend us and stop the opposition from breaking through.
Artillery is the real god of war, and artillery weapons are the most powerful in my opinion, because you can have the missile, the gun, and shoot 15 kilometers in distance. You can't even see the enemy, but you shoot.
А ти й не знаєш. Вроді би не бачиш ворога, а воно рветься.
From the time that we got here last November to now, there's been tremendous improvements in several areas. The development of quality standards has come along, particularly for the heavy weapon systems. We're getting close to finished product. The use of mission orders and planning, and particularly like the development of concept of operation sketches, has come from being a rough idea to being pretty proficient.
There have been various incidents. We've been covered with missiles and mortars and large caliber weapons. Tanks fired at us. I was injured right at the very end. I was the last day. It was the last day just before we left. The artillery unit started to severely shoot at us. We ran for cover, and 5 minutes after there was a real big explosion. And that was it. I don't remember anything else. I just switched off. When I came out of it, everything was smoky. Everything. And there were those concrete slabs on my feet. They were pressing on my feet. They didn't land all the way up my leg. They were just pressing down really hard on my feet. Our guys ran while under fire. They dug themselves in. One guy died. He was crushed by the slabs. Others got concussions, different kinds of injuries like that.
Різні пошкодження такі, тобто...
Starting from the limbs, we check for bleeding. We check with our hands to see if he has a head injury or bullet holes. Then we take off his bulletproof vest. Then we cut all his clothes with scissors. Check the ribs aren't broken. Turn him onto his side in the recovery position. Now he's ready to be evacuated. Have you covered medicine at this point?
Yes, we have.
Are you saying something different, or is everything pretty much the same?
Different, and everything is mixed up.
Completely different. Now split into pairs and do exactly what he did. Choose who's going to be injured and then swap places.
You go somewhere and look at the students who are studying, going out, sitting in bars or somewhere. But people are already used to watching the news. People can get used to anything. They can reconcile themselves to some things and not to others. And after 24 years, my opinion on war has changed. You can't sleep as well as you used to. You can break down in the middle of the night. It doesn't happen that often, after someone reminds me of something during a conversation with friends. But I've become tougher maybe.
That's everything. Now switch.
Don't take off your vest.
Why?
Because of the microphone. Just pretend that you're taking it off.
And when you're checking up on your injured friend and see an injury, use the first aid kit, which can be found at
There are international partners from how many countries, how do they work together, and overall how many people are there and for how long would it last?
Okay, so UNIFIER is, again, but 200 soldiers, but part of a larger mission. It's not a formally organized structure, but we work very closely with American counterparts. They're roughly the same size as the Canadian mission, with about 200 soldiers each, largely based in Western Ukraine. We also work closely with Polish partners, Lithuanian partners, other Baltic nations, even Swedish partners, Danish partners as well. It's a community of nations that works together, but works with the Ukrainians, assisting them in the programs that they seek assistance with.
It's already 4 years since the Russian aggression in Ukraine, and people expect support, which is because not just because it's Ukraine, it's about the breach of the international law, and it's extremely interesting because it's war. What's exactly happening from the military side? But the military is not just about the training or providing the equipment. So what are the activities which are in, and how your program is also changing?
It's not all just about the military side, and neither is NATO just about the military and the training side of things. Within the NATO context here in Ukraine, our program sort of has three areas. One is around capability development, and that is mainly focused on developing civil servants in the defense and security sector to achieve sort of professionalization, as Brian referred to in the military context, but in the civil sector context, to be able to support and defend the progress and the reform efforts that Ukraine has underway in the defense and security sector. So that's one aspect of what we do. But we also recognize there's a lot of work that Ukraine still wants to do as it keeps moving towards its Euro-Atlantic aspirations. So we also have a role in terms of providing advice. And when I say advice, that covers a rather broad swath. It's advice from whether it is at a senior sort of legislative, parliamentary perspective, as well as getting into how do you build a logistics and standardization system within a military context. Other programs that NATO has here would be around defense education. It's one thing to achieve and to build capacity within the military context, but sustainability requires education and institutional change. So sort of in concert together, both these bilateral and these sort of more the technical and the training missions, along with sort of the strategic advisory and capacity development aspects of it. That's what NATO is really focused on here as well.
And Brian, if you speak about the training, for instance, and the story we've seen, how it's changing and what are the new things people are learning, because in particularly in the context of the conflict we have here.
it's a really interesting topic. I'd say at the training level, there's a lot of just fundamentals that we continue to work with. But the Ukrainians now understand those fundamentals. They have instructors themselves, and they're able to deliver them. I think it is interesting that it's an evolving environment. We all learn from each other, and so even our trainers who work alongside, we are both sharing lessons and developing a great appreciation for even how modern conflict might be evolving. But we also look at our, as Sharon sort of talked, we also look at trying to now get into less training, more into the institutions, starting to work with the schools, the academies, and the like. And even the Canadian UNIFIER mission now works on as many as 12 bases around Ukraine, trying to sort of build those systems, that a professional military would have. If you talk timelines, we're here at Ukraine's request. We very much work towards or within the framework of the Strategic Defence Bulletin, which sets out some objectives for 2020. But we also recognize that Canada's been working closely with Ukraine since 1994, and we would probably continue to work well beyond 2020 with a nation that we see as a partner. From my perspective, there's a lot that is being done on the training side, and there is remarkable progress, growth, development. It is a very impressive armed forces size, strength, and capacity that now exist in Ukraine. I think where the measurable and the important pieces to look at is how the institution is reforming, how we're going from what was maybe you could say even a Soviet way of doing business to what becomes more a Western way. And if you're going to be interoperable with Ukraine, you need to have command systems that share not only just, we can't only just talk to each other, but we can communicate in ways that we understand. And so we might have different ways in how we communicate our orders, how we command, a bit of the philosophy, how we delegate responsibilities. And I think some of those things that you start to see a generation that works and interoperates with partners, but also a generation that is ready to move Ukraine even further forward. It's remarkable progress that has been made, and I think points to further progress.
And Sharon, from your side, what are also the things to track, and what are these directions? There are some clear, we understand, like civilian oversight over the military, but what also inside the system?
I'm glad you mentioned civilian oversight and democratic oversight, because that's part of the package towards looking at how Ukraine continues to move forward in its democratic development and rule of law. Again, consistent with Euro-Atlantic principles on how your defense and your security sector respond to your elected government. The democratic oversight is something that we see evolving, but something that's necessary to continue to move those changes, those reforms in the right direction. In addition, there's a little bit, you mentioned the law on national security, which recently has been passed. There's a lot of different things that will flow from that. And from a NATO perspective, we're very keen to continue working with our Ukrainian colleagues to help develop some of those elements, whether they be structural within how ministries interact in the sector, whether it be in terms of the various sort of subordinate pieces of legislation, such as how security services work, how you look at things like sharing of classified information between partners and allies and that sort of thing. From our perspective, this is what we see running along in parallel to what our colleagues in the Canadian mission, UNIFIER, as well as the other partners that are out there. We mentioned the US, the UK, and others run along, because it's structural and institutional all at the same time and bringing it together.
Thanks a lot for providing this context to our audience, as we understand that this time we're speaking not just about the summit, but in particularly and about NATO, but what is in particular the support to the Ukrainian army and how the trainings here are taking place and what the Operation UNIFIER means.